Still says, there we go.
Hello, welcome to episode 56 of the PHP Town Hall. You have myself, Ben Edmonds, here with Amanda Folsom, and a blast from the past, Philip Reginald Sturgeon.
Oh, how did you know my middle name was Reginald? I thought I kept that secret. I killed the only person.
I thought all Englishmen had that middle name.
About 95%, you are right. The other ones are Heachcliff and Marmaduke. Those are the two.
Marmaduke.
I actually convinced an ex-girlfriend. I convinced an ex-girlfriend that my full name was Philip James Heachcliff Archibald Sturgeon III, and she genuinely believed me for about 20 minutes. And then I tried repeating it the second time, and I think I got Heachcliff and Archibald around the wrong way, and she busted me. But that was the best 20 minutes of my life when she believed that to be true.
All right, so we all know how well.
We need to talk about your hobbies. Yes, exactly.
I just felt so accomplished, you know?
All right, so
do you need help?
For those that don't know, Phil used to be a co-host of the podcast, and then he left the PHP world for Ruby Land and various other things. So Phil, how's Ruby treating you?
Pretty good. I'm past the honeymoon phase where everything is fantastic and it's a wonderful idea. It's still quite nice being over there because a lot of the ecosystem is kind of 4 years ahead in a lot of ways. Like they got gems before PHP got Composer. They got a lot of stuff kind of a bit before PHP got it. So they've been dealing with problems that PHP didn't really get to until 4 years after them. So it's kind of funny to see the two communities go through the same sort of stuff with a bit of a lag. But luckily there's a lot of people that kind of work with Ruby and PHP, and there's a lot of people that look at different languages, so they kind of take ideas and bring them across. So it's not a full 4 year lag, but it's still definitely kind of a little bit behind where Ruby is a lot of the time.
So what's some of the core stuff you'd seen, like libraries or functionality that you maybe had in Ruby but don't in PHP, other than some of the cool object-oriented stuff that's default?
Well, pretty much all the league stuff, right? Like everything's in the league is either a direct copy, like literally a port of something in Ruby, or was inspired by. So these days it's kind of hard for me to tell because I've been focusing pretty much on Ruby. Then I'm not going back and using PHP, so I can't really say, what is there that isn't in the PHP world. But I don't know. I don't really know how the HTTP2 tooling is going in the PHP world, as far as I can tell. Just not. But Ruby's starting to get there a little bit. So there's some cool stuff when it comes to HTTP and things like that.
Cool. So I guess we should jump in a little bit to the main topic here is going to be APIs and all things around that, since that's kind of your forte now. So you're writing a new book, right? And what's that about?
Yeah, the new book is called Talking to Other People's APIs, which is a really boring title and I can't think of anything better, so I'm just going with it for now. The idea is it's like the other side of the coin, right? So the first book was about how to build APIs that are fantastic or whatever, and this is a book for the other people, the people that have to talk to the API that you just built, because no one is explaining that to anyone. Like we've got all these developers that really, really care about we're going to use all these RESTful practices and we're going to put these links in and we're going to use hypermedia. So you call this link and do options on it. And then you find this thing and then you do that and you do that. And there's these front end developers that have no idea about any of that stuff because they focus on other things completely. So it's kind of teaching, it's not just front end developers like mobile and iOS people, that have to deal with talking to other APIs. It's like API developers ourselves, anyone who makes any application that talks to another API. So front end, back end, we all have to deal with talking to other people's APIs, and we need to look out for when you're talking to an RPC or a REST or a GraphQL API, what's different. Look out for some kind of common practices that might be really bad ideas, but if the server's doing this thing, how do I respond? What do I do about retry after? What do I do about I'm getting kind of timeout errors, or what should I set my timeouts at? You know, they're talking about they've got these JSON schema links in there, and I have no idea what that is. So what do I do with that, or all this sort of stuff that like no one explains to the average like JavaScript developer or whatever. Should work out, you know. Hopefully, got to get that boat. That's the plan. Didn't get the boat the last time, so boat attempt number 2.
Isn't that what Bitcoins are for, though? Boats?
Yeah, if Bitcoin would go up instead of sideways, then maybe.
So you use the book money to buy the Bitcoins, and then
you're I feel like for the last couple of months, Bitcoin is like the average soccer game. You just spend 2 hours watching it, and it's 0-0 at the end. Good time.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually pretty accurate.
Everybody talks about it, but yeah, it doesn't really seem like you're saying anything. Right?
Apart from there are 2 people listening right now, probably the only 2 people that are listening right now, and one of them is really mad that an English guy just called it soccer, and the other one's really mad that I said 2 hours when it's only 90 minutes. Can we edit that in post?
Deal.
No,
done.
Keeping it. Done.
I never give a shit about football anyway. They can have that.
And you've just offended like the one British person listening.
Yeah.
Someone the other day, I was at PHP Southwest yesterday, and someone said that I had a comedy accent that's a halfway mixture between Bristolian and New York, and I've never been more offended in my life.
But also, like, it's kind of right.
It's just terrible. I want to sound like you people. I'm going to start, I don't know, I'm going to start shouting, "Get off my land," and things, and it's just no good.
You got to shout America with like 2 pistols, one in each hand, and got to get like your big 10-gallon hat.
Yeah, I'd do an impression, but there are people in this house that who are asleep. That would probably be a slight dick move. It is midnight at the moment, so that's why I have a BBC weather reporter's voice right now.
Well, and a real American wouldn't care.
This is true. Did we actually have a plan for anything to talk about tonight? I can't remember if we were.
Well, so you did mention you're in England, right? And deportation was one of the topics. So why are you in England again?
This is actually the best time I've been kicked out of the country. The last 2 times I was kicked out is because I was working for a startup that went bankrupt through no fault of my own. I keep picking the losers. But I am working for a company called WeWork, who very nicely applied for a brand new visa for me 18-ish months ago. And I never bothered getting the actual visa in my passport. I had an extension letter. I had my visa, thought it was good to go. Came home for Christmas and got stuck. So I've been doing a lot of API development from the fantastic town of Pucklechurch, which is on a list. I can't remember the website, but there's a list of quaint British town names, and it's number 2. So I've been riding my bike around because there's only one horse in that town, and he's quite often borrowed. So I need to get around in the only other way possible, by cycling. And I managed to crash my bike again yesterday because it's all just cow shit and mud around there. So good times.
Exciting.
Yeah.
What is the? You got the visa worked out, right? So what's the next step?
Yeah. I've been over in London at the embassy, and it was hilarious. At the embassy, I was like one of the last 10 people to get my visa done because they're closing down the embassy and moving somewhere else. And the guy didn't give a shit. Like, he's just like sitting there sideways, just like playing solitaire on his phone. There's some dude ripping cables out the wall, and he was like, "Yeah, normally it's like 10 days processing, but we're probably going to get this done for you in like 2 days. We're trying to get out of it, to be honest." It's really funny. Yeah, I think it's already at home. I can leave pretty much any time now, luckily. So it's only been like 2 weeks.
Nice.
Not too bad.
Cool.
Yeah, we'll be in a bar again soon, Ben. Don't worry.
Yes. I've like barely left my house because it's so fucking cold here. So.
Yeah, I saw that it was -27, and I wasn't actually too upset about being here. Everyone thinks the UK is like wet and cold, but it's always just meh. Like in the summer it's meh, and in the winter it's meh, and then it's just meh in between. But New York is like, Jesus fucking Christ. It gets cold, it gets hot. You can die most of the year, depending on what's going on.
It's kind of the worst weather you could ask for in the country. I don't know why we all live here.
That's like a Northeast Coast thing. Like,
Yeah,
it might rain and stuff in Oregon and Seattle, but like you don't get the shit that like Boston or New York or even DC gets.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that video that's going around like 2-3 years ago of some dude who was taking a shovel on his bike on the way to work in Boston, and he was just like, all the sidewalks were so covered in snow from all the snowplows, he was digging a tunnel through every single day. Like it's more than a human size. Like he was cycling straight through that, even crouching, just digging that tunnel. Then they come and bulldoze it in because it was unsafe, and the next day you just dig that tunnel again.
Jesus.
Yeah, I don't know what motivates these people, but it's hilarious and well done.
Anger.
To them. Yeah.
Spite.
Just stubbornness, I think.
Fuck the establishment.
Yeah.
All right. Do we want to talk about API stuff?
Let's do it.
I don't like
Let's
APIs.
talk about API stuff.
I don't like that.
Yeah, I don't either. I think everybody accepts APIs as a thing to get other things done. I don't think a lot of people actually enjoy them.
Yeah, actually, strangely, neither do I. I think the reason I care about it so much is like at first it was interesting when it was new and unique and different, and now that it's like, you know, it's just saving a form without the HTML, man. It's not that different. Now that I've kind of realized that stuff, most of what motivates me is that although people see it, it's just a way to get a thing done. Like I've got this data over here and I want to just shove it over there. That's like a really naive happy path kind of idea of just like, I will put that there and that will be fine, and that's all that needs to happen. And I've seen like so many things go wrong, so many different production issues, so many performance problems, so many just human expectation errors of matching expectations by two different teams on different sides of the wire. And after seeing a bajillion things go wrong, I'm like, okay, it would be cool if things didn't always go wrong. Maybe I could point out some of these things and then shit wouldn't break every day.
It doesn't have to be painful.
Yeah. And then once everyone knows how to make APIs, I'll just go work at McDonald's.
Maybe
I'd actually pay to see that.
There you go. I've already got my new show.
All right. So you mentioned JSON Schema earlier. Do you want to like fill people in on what that's for?
Yeah. JSON Schema is something that's been around for a while, and I looked at it ages ago and I didn't really get it and I didn't really care. And years later, or whatever, a while later, I've kind of realized it's probably the most important thing to happen to the world of APIs since the concept of REST came along. So JSON Schema is basically one of many ways of describing your JSON. So you can have some JSON and it's got, you know, distance 5. Well, all right, what is that distance? Is it yards, kilometers, feet? I have no idea. So you can put like a human readable description in there. You can define the data type of various fields. So you can say, you know, integer, string, array, all that obvious stuff. And just loads of other stuff. You put default values, you put example values. If you have a status field, for example, you can put an enum in there with various different accepted statuses. And it's a lot of people ignore JSON Schema because you have to write it in JSON, and it's kind of hard to write that stuff. But there's a bunch of like software out there that handles editing them for you. But generally, the whole idea is just defining a contract. You just want to say, here is some data, and here is the shape that it should be. And this idea is nothing new. This idea has been around forever. It was actually one of the fundamental concepts in SOAP, and it was the thing that made people really hate SOAP. We kind of go on this weird roundabout where people want to be vague and then they want to be specific, but then they get tired of being specific because it's extra work. So they want to be vague and then they get burned from being vague because they weren't specific enough, and it goes backwards and forwards. So like XML RPC, for example, was just here's some XML, and in XML everything's a string. So if you send a 5 or you send an empty string or you want to send like nothing, it's all the same. And so like numeric strings and actual integers, they're all strings. So XML RPC kind of sucked for sending different data types, and no one really knew what the data was. So they made SOAP, which had WSDLs, and part of a WSDL was XML schema. An XML schema would describe the data and tell you what you had. And that was pretty cool. That was really helpful. And you can build a lot of SDKs, and you can generate, you know, client code, and you can do validation based on the XML schema. You can do loads and loads of stuff. Then everyone got fed up with having to write those. So they went back to, hey, here's just some random JSON, and you get a few more data types of JSON, but it still doesn't tell you whether that distance 5 is a mile or a meter. So we're kind of moving back towards having JSON schema describe your data. And you can do a million things with it. And what I really like, I think, is the fact that it's optional. Your APIs can have JSON schema in there, and you just literally have like a little link in the header or in the body, and it says like, hey, here's the schema file. You can download it if you want. You can validate it if you want. You can, inspect the data if you want, or you can just ignore it and keep on doing your file get contents URL and just assume that that's fine and ignore everything else in the world. And if your shit explodes, then meh. When you come complaining about it, we'll point you towards the JSON schema, and then everything will be okay. So I kind of like this approach of being specific if you want, but being vague if you're lazy.
My favorite part of it is, so like if you're consuming other people's APIs, you always hit that thing where they didn't document it well or whatever, they break something, and they don't want to admit that they broke it. And so it's really nice to have the schema and be able to say like, here, this fucking validates against the schema. What did you break? Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's really helpful in that way.
That's the thing. The schema can be turned into documentation easily enough. There are some tools that do work directly with JSON schema. You can also have OpenAPI kind of import your JSON schema files. OpenAPI and JSON schema are really close to being the same thing. They're like slightly different. That's APIbusters.com podcast episode 4 for that conversation. But yeah, you can do a lot with JSON schema. You can have human readable documentation. You can have server-side validation. So instead of writing loads and loads and loads of PHP code that says like the email field is required and it should be a valid email address, you can just import the JSON schema file and then use the PHP League has a package called JSON Guard. So you just pass your payload into the JSON schema validator, and then it will just go bang. Yeah, this is a valid payload, and it's way more. You can do a lot of stuff with it. Obviously, you can't be like, oh, this email has to be unique, right? That's something that PHP does need to do. But you can validate your incoming payload with the JSON schema file. And the clients can also validate with the JSON schema file themselves. If you're making your JSON schema files public, people can download them, and the iOS application can validate using that file. And so you can skip going over the wire for basic validation errors, and you can avoid hard coding your validation in the client and having that validation get out of date, right? Because if you say, I don't know, like your passwords locally in the iOS app, if password, max length 40, and then you change max length, then you have two different apps with two different validation rules, and that gets really annoying. Or I don't know, some new required field pops up, or you suddenly make a field not required. Whatever these validation changes are, they can really mess you up if you have, if the client and the server have different expectations. But if the client is using expectations defined by the server that server is also using, then you're all agreeing to the same stuff, and your documentation and your client validation and your server validation are all exactly the same thing. That's like a really powerful feature, and it makes a lot of your code base be like language agnostic. You could, if most of your application is just fulfilling the contracts, it's passing incoming data and making sure it's valid and shoving it in the database, and then different endpoints are like pulling it out and just shoving that JSON on the page. You can switch framework or language or just rebuild it however the hell you want, and it's really easy to do,
Yeah, we actually did exactly that at a company that I worked at. They wanted to switch from Rails to Scala for some reason, and that actually went okay. Nothing, like as far as the end users knew, nothing really changed for them. Actually, it got a little bit faster, but that's a longer story than we have time for. No. Like it was a series of turd polishings that were not Rails specific. It's not Rails' fault, that's for sure.
Yeah, definitely don't want anyone thinking the takeaway of why I like JSON schema is that you can switch your language on a daily basis. Because I always laughed about like repositories for that. The argument for repositories in certain frameworks was like, yeah, you can switch from MySQL to Mongo every week. And I'm like, why would you ever?
Who does that?
But,
Who fucking does that?
But I do like the idea of like doing less in the actual framework or in the actual language, right? Because even though you aren't changing your framework or changing your language on a regular basis, they keep releasing new versions of stuff, right? And half this stuff that you need an API to do is some package or some gem that's like an extension to your favorite framework, and the framework changes weekly if you're using certain ones. and packages get abandoned. And so the less you can make your framework do, the better. And there's a lot of open source tools. So like API gateways, for example, they are amazing. They can do, they can handle your authentication, and they can handle your rate limiting, and they can handle all this stuff that you don't really want to be doing at like Laravel app level. They can just do it on the outside, and you get a consistent effect, regardless of what framework you're using for that one specific thing. So if you move a lot of logic into the API gateway, and then a lot of your code is just kind of satisfying contract agreements you've written in JSON, which is super portable, then you're not really doing that much in the framework anymore, and you're coding less and having fewer bugs and going to the pub more, which is the main thing.
That's kind of the end goal.
Or riding your bike or walking your dog or doing whatever you want.
All right. So what do you want to cover next?
Can we just throw GraphQL out there and see what he says?
Fight.
It's really funny. So I started writing about GraphQL about just over a year ago. And at the time I was like, it makes sense for a different use case, like different tools for different jobs. That's cool. And over time, I'm increasingly wonder why the fuck you'd use it for anything. It's weird. It basically, for me, it's weird because it took a bunch of really good ideas that you could already do in your REST APIs, right? It took a bunch of best practices that most people were doing for years or advocating for years, and took tools that already exist, and it definitely put it into a nice single package with a nice marketing website, right? Like if you go and look at the REST dissertation and you look at that white page with the Times New Roman versus the GraphQL, marketing site, obviously for a brand new person that doesn't know how to do APIs, going to that one website and installing that one package and reading that one tutorial is going to make a lot more sense. So I think for me, it's always been it's been difficult to accept that use case, because it's like someone just gave me a CMS and said, this is how you should build everything now. I'm like, no, that CMS has removed all of the choices that I know the answers behind using A or B. And sometimes I want A and sometimes I want B. Why would you tell me that I always have to use A? Fuck off. So I think there's a lot of people out there that benefit from GraphQL because they don't know the 15 different things that GraphQL has chosen for them. But if they understood more, they might not agree with the choices that it made. So it's kind of weird to have my hand forced in that way. But the main problem is that it only replaces REST-ish APIs. And over the last year, I've really kind of got a bigger and better understanding of what that ish is really missing. And you miss hypermedia completely. You have no way of creating like an intelligent application that can browse itself and be trained to respond to different links and handle things accordingly, which everyone always thinks is magic and you can answer it, but it just takes a long time. And it fucks caching completely. Like I gave a talk about this yesterday at PHP Southwest, and the if you look at the caching section of the GraphQL website, it literally says, because GraphQL supports IDs, you can build rich client caches. Like, what the fuck? The example has like, oh yeah, this Star Wars actor has an ID of 3003. Go build a cache off that. Like where, how, from what metadata do I get? How do I build a cache out of just knowing the thing? It's like if you know someone's name, you're supposed to know what their favorite color is and how old they are and when the last time they brushed their teeth was. Like you can't just guess this random stuff. So caching in GraphQL just doesn't exist, and it forces the client to build all of the caching, and they have to guess how long they think they should cache the data for, and the guesses might be different in different applications. So you might have a mobile app and a web app showing completely different information because the mobile client guessed at 8 hours and the website guessed at 6 hours, and something changed. Now you've got different answers, and just the whole thing is it forces the clients to do way more stuff than they should be, just because they've completely ignored the concept of hypermedia controls and caching, and that just seems like something that shouldn't ever happen. I don't know why. Why you'd ever use GraphQL for that, apart from laziness and ignorance. I don't know.
I mean, I could defend Graph, and I don't really use Graph much, right? Because REST does solve most all the problems I've run into. So maybe I shouldn't defend it. But if I were going to defend it, it would be that if you wanted some type of like query language over HTTP, it's a decent solution for that. But if you want,
sure, but it's the fifth one.
REST at all, right?
Right. Yeah, I just had to jump in and interrupt you there because you've been talking quite a lot so far tonight, Ben.
Just like old times.
Sorry, bud. That's the funny thing, right? So that is a valid thing to say. That, you know, if you want a query language over HTTP, then great, GraphQL is released and now we have one, but we've had them for years and no one ever used them. There's FICL and Sparkle and OData, and OData is a GraphQL language on top of REST, and people ignore them.
Argument that back then we didn't have the same rich data that we do now, or at least not as easily accessible. And so the idea of having, no matter if it's the first one or the fifth one, I mean, REST isn't the first protocol around how you do HTTP messages, right? So to have a universal way we all agree we'll talk about queries over HTTP is a good thing to have in our tool belt.
Sure, but I'm saying they've always existed.
REST to do it, but REST doesn't do it in like a good way.
So
sure,
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, you go on.
I was just going to say, I mean, sure, I mean, things like that have always existed, but I feel like there was a point in time where people didn't really need them either. I think data sets have grown, and that's made GraphQL more appealing to people. And it's also just got the hype train behind it, which helps a lot.
Yeah, I think the hype train is a lot of what it's about. I mean, OData can absolutely 100% solve the same queries and more on GraphQL. GraphQL is actually quite a limited query language in a lot of ways. I've tried, like in my research and in my experiments with it, like it doesn't really solve the problems I want when it comes to including data. If you try to scope, if you try to filter the includes that you're making, you can. So you have to get all of those things. If you're requesting an A and you want some Bs, you have to get all of the Bs that are related to it. You can't say, you know, where B whatever, where fir equals bar on these Bs, you can't strip them out. So things like that are really fundamentally just weak.
I mean, wouldn't that be kind of like saying though, like, why should we use Rails when we could use, you know, whatever more micro framework is out there, right? Like, this would gives us more flexibility. It doesn't configure things for us, doesn't force our hand in anything. Yeah, but part of the advantage is that it simplifies it because it forces everyone to do it a certain way.
Oh, what I'm saying, I suppose, is that if people's argument for why GraphQL should be used as a query language because, you know, it's more advanced now and the, you know, data is more rich and more whatever, and I'm saying that the newest one isn't the best one, it's actually quite weak compared to previous ones that have existed for a very long time, right? This idea that the things we're solving now are so much more intelligent and raw is probably also quite false. I think FICL and Sparkle both were able to handle some really complex queries, and to be fair, the syntax was gross, but they were handling like really complex wiki situations and you know, a lot of related data, and you could do a lot of very interesting things with those that you just literally can't do with GraphQL. So GraphQL is basically the wrapped up packaged embodiment of JSON API, and the same approach to that stuff, which is I want to get A, and then I want to make sure I get all of the B's and C's, or B.C, right, embedded. I want to get all those things in a single round trip. And that is what it's focusing on. It's kind of doing it with a little bit of query language syntax, but really it's more about like, get me the resource and then include the things because I'm scared of HTTP handshakes and I'm scared of hitting the network 10 times or whatever. I want to hit that thing once. And so you have this like weak kind of meh query syntax helping you do that thing. So if you want a query language, it's actually quite a bad query language. If you want flexibility in what you include and what you embed, that's not really a very good idea anymore anyway. Like with HTTP2 coming along and being supported by more and more systems like we were saying earlier, it's not really supported by PHP, and Rails is getting there, but Go has loads of support. With that coming along, it's becoming less important to try and grab as much data as you can and make that server just strain and just generate all that JSON and shove it over the pipe. What you really want to be doing is having these small targeted endpoints that are highly cacheable behind network proxy.
Let's start that, because again, PHP world, we don't have much of that yet. Explain a little bit about what differs with 2 versus 1 HTTP.
Probably a good way of putting it is think about every single CSS and JavaScript hack you've ever done to try and make the page performance good. Like if you go to any of these websites that
jQuery.
Yeah, if you go to like any of these Pingdom, any of these websites, they give you a performance score out of 100, right? It'll say things like you have too many CSS and JavaScript files, you need to combine them into a single file, or you should have different URLs for you should use different host names for different things, because the browser is limited to a certain number of requests it can make per domain name, so you should split them out into multiple things. And if this might not be the right podcast for like front end performance advice, but if you go through that list of stuff that you were meant to do to make your website performant in HTTP 1.1, it actually fucks you in HTTP 2. The idea of having multiple domains is kind of daft, because you're now doing multiple handshakes, whereas really with HTTP 2, you just use the one connection and it would push down as many assets as you would need over the same connection. So the multiple requests is actually slower than doing the one. And the idea of like combining those CSS files and JavaScript files into mega files is actually much worse when using H2, because it doesn't want to sit there like generating this mega file and having to push it down the pipe. Like having smaller files coming asynchronously in multiplex down the pipe as and when they're ready is much more performant. And the API approach is the same way. We've been bending over backwards to come up with a way where a user can say, or the API consumer can say, like, I want to get this, I want to get this resource in the URL, but I don't want to have to come back every single time I want to know this article's author or whatever, right? I don't want to come back for extra data afterwards, because every single request I make, there's a round trip. I have to do DNS. I have to come to blah, 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 blah. And so people have been really scared of making multiple network trips. And so we just jam it. We jam it all into the same thing. And so we have these weird things where we have different representations of the same data, where we'll have like get users and include trips and profile and all these other kind of related things. And then somebody else is going to say, okay, get all the trips, but then get all the users and all the profiles. And there'll be two really similar bits of data that are completely different. And the server's straining to generate these chunks of JSON, and they're completely missing the cache because they're totally different requests. And we're just doing all this stuff. And with HTTP2, you wouldn't do that. You would just make multiple requests. And the main reason for that is that you can use the same connection. There's something called server push. So if you request, resource A, it can then say, oh, you're going to want these resource Bs too. And it can start throwing those resource Bs down the pipe. And then you can, asynchronously say, all right, I've got these Bs, I want to go fetch some Cs too. And you can asynchronously do all of those and stitch them together afterwards. And you've made a whole bunch of requests really quickly. And you've taken care of the related data idea at the transportation layer instead of forcing the application layer to worry about it,
Yeah, that makes sense. It definitely makes caching a whole lot easier. That's one of the hardest problems really that I hit with, it's computers in general, especially APIs, is how do you cache appropriately while still leaving it flexible enough for people to, do what they want with it.
That's a tough thing with, if you have the resource A is cached and then you're including B and C and D. If you're only caching within the application, you have to make sure that any changes to any of those included resources are bubbling up something that will invalidate the A cache, right? So whenever you change anything, you have to invalidate all of its related resources, just on the off chance that someone's calling up that resource first and asking to include these other things. Whereas if you're using something like conditional caching over HTTP, where you use e tags and you're only requesting resource A and resource A has its E tag there, then when you say, hey, I want resource A, is this E tag good or bad? And it will be like, yeah, you're fine. Or now you want to re-request that. But then you're making other completely separate HTTP requests to B, C, D, whatever else. Then it will use the cache or not appropriately. So again, you've taken the worry about caching out of the application and put it entirely at the network layer and the transportation layer, which is where it should be. I should drink more wine. I'm actually making sense, I think. This is...
No, it's probably like the right level, right? You have too little.
You've reached your Balmer peak, man.
Yeah. Again, I'm having to be quiet because I'm in someone else's house. Last time I think we tried doing a podcast, I was in Puckle Church again and trying to avoid waking the parents up. And now I want to make sure I don't wake up Alex Bilby and his partner.
How was Alex? He was a culinary guy back in the day.
Yeah, doing very well. He's become an AWS consultant. If anyone needs any help with AWS stuff, he is certified. A certified prick.
I didn't know they even did certifications. So.
Oh, yeah.
Multiple levels. Might have to
They
give
do.
it a try.
They get ads for it all the time.
How much is it? $5,000, I'm sure.
I don't know, because all the things that I get are like, come to AWS reInvent. We'll give you a coupon code that's like 73% off or some like random number. But yeah, to get to reInvent is like several $1,000s. So
and it's usually in Vegas or some shit. I just can't
no, I've been.
idea.
Like it's a great event. This is totally tangential, but yeah, very, very expensive to get into, but it's absolutely enormous.
Just can't stand the idea of hanging out with 4,000 programmers in Las Vegas.
Oh yeah, I did that with ZenCon that 1 year, and I just tried to get away from them as much as possible.
I can tolerate maybe 72 hours of Vegas and Vegas people, and then I need to leave. I can't deal. Anyway, we have some other stuff to talk about. Right?
We were going to talk a little bit about PHP.
Yeah, guys, tell me what's going on with PHP. I've not been paying attention. I care. I just haven't been looking. And I don't know what's new. Anything fun in 7.3? Anything, any big dramas happened that I missed out on? What's going on?
So nothing crazy in the language since you dropped off. Nothing that stands out. I mean, we had a couple new syntactic triggers, like the splat operator is probably new since you used it, or some of the new 7.2 stuff. Nothing crazy though.
Ooh, I'm interested. Splat me. What's going on? What is that?
So you know how you used to do what is it? Filter? No, I don't remember the function. There's a function, so like if you pass in an array to a method, it'll split out the arguments. So now there's just like a dot and then the variable and it splits it for you. Just
okay.
Nice and easy.
Very nice. So it takes an array of things and just turns it into, once you pass it in to an argument, it will just translate that into a series of arguments as opposed to a singular array. Is that?
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I think ECMAScript calls that argument unpacking or something. But yeah, there's a million different names for the same bloody stuff.
Yeah. That's very exciting.
You look really excited.
The drama's been kind of boring lately. Like the
I did see the Lara Elite.
Restructured some things, got rid of a lot of their drama.
Laravel's
been kind of quiet. I think I don't know. Taylor Otwell found Jesus or something. He's been kind of quiet on that front. So.
Yeah, I did see the Lara Elite thing. I think that's probably been the most dramatic thing. I don't know who did it.
I don't either.
But the community.
Two people reached out to ask me if it was me. I was like, no,
Really?
I have shit to do.
Yeah, no, it seems like some people received it very well and kind of thought it was a joke, and other people took it very, very personally. So
I thought it was funny. It didn't call it any one person, so I didn't necessarily find it in poor taste in any way.
Yeah, I think whenever you are making fun of somebody, right, that can go in a bunch of different ways, and you just have to like think about the intent of who did it. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people who are insecure enough to think that any intent is going to be bad. There's a lot of people that come at it with, I'm sure they were just kidding, and they take it much better. Yeah, it seemed to me like it came across as like a pretty funny thing, and them being a bit silly. They clearly put a bit of work into it. There's more than a few words on that website, so they had a real go at it. But yeah, I would absolutely understand if somebody got really upset, but I really hope they didn't. Like, it was clearly a joke.
There was one thing on there that was kind of disparaging and like obviously meant in like a good humored way, but I don't know that it was received that way, and I don't know that it was worded well enough that that was super obvious to people. But I think that may have changed. Of course, I don't want to call them out now.
That's fair enough.
Yeah.
But oh, sorry, I keep jumping in. I think there's a bit of lag. But no, as a Brit who uses dry humor a lot, and then kind of notices Americans just be like, they take things very literally often when you're saying something. And the number of times I've been like, well, code's broken, I'm just gonna have to delete the whole repo, and they're like, no, don't, that would be a real waste of work. I'm like, no, I wasn't kidding, I was fucking joking. So like that happens a lot. And after 5 years, I would have hoped that either people people that I work with and hang out with would get it, or I guess I just have to change my personality to suit the lowest common denominator. But yeah, dry humor can be a tricky one. So often it seems like someone's being a sarcastic prick, but really they're saying something with love and a big smile behind their face. You just can't see the smile because not everything's meant to be, hey, laugh track bullshit. That's what Americans want. If it hasn't got a laugh track, it's not a joke, and therefore you're being mean, and you should stop because I'm offended. You can tell I'm back in the UK.
That was a beautiful rant. Yeah, that was a great rant.
I always rant about America when I'm not in it more, and then I'm just like, oh, I'm here, I better play ball, for fuck's sake.
It's fair. No.
Well, on a random rant, I left everyone in a gap.
It's all good, man. It's all good. No, as far as drama goes, some people got kicked off the mailing list for being aggressive. The internals mailing list.
I noticed that. That.
That's really it.
Oh yeah, I saw that little internals thing. Right, so somebody's just like kind of spamming the board to get their point across.
It was Tony Marston, the same person who complained about PHP 4 style constructors being removed from PHP 7 because some apps might want those, because every programming language should strive to make the newest version of the software work with 20-year-old code without any change whatsoever. That was that guy. And yeah, goodbye.
Yeah, I remember a discussion not too long ago about like Composer versus not using Composer, and that got pretty heated. So I'm not surprised. I'm sure there's a discussion to be had about whether or not people. I actually don't want to bring this up anymore because it just takes me back to the fig stuff. We're like, are you censoring people? Like, yeah, let's just not even. Let's just not even.
Sure.
So you're not a secretary anymore, right, Amanda?
I'm not. I haven't been since April.
But they are electing, or what do they call it when they choose new people?
Yeah, so they're holding elections for secretaries and new core committee members.
Nice. Who's in the running?
Last I checked, let's see. I have it open in my email.
We should just call out to Amanda's amazing wine glass there. That's like the size.
Yeah, it's called a Bubba. Like, you can't even make this up. There we go.
Tankard.
Yeah, it is. It's basically a tankard. Oh, I was looking at secretaries. Actually, my email's not loading. So if you'd like to see who's in the running for secretary, there's a wonderful mailing list that you're welcome to join, and you will be able to see who's in the running for that, as well as core committee members. I can't search my email right now. Thanks.
Ooh.
Yeah, no, I've been having problems with Gmail all day. But yeah, so the secretary stuff, I believe there's one position open because they just elected 2, and then core committee members every position, I believe.
Okay.
Nice.
Every position? Like, do they re-elect every time?
No, I think there's a handful of people that are going to stick around, but I think it's a majority of people. I'd have to double check. I know Colum's going to hear this, and he's going to say something to me about it because I should know.
Yeah, so apart from the kind of reshuffling of all the different positions and whatnot, what else is the Fig up to, right? They're working on a new middleware related thing. I kind of got lost with all the middleware stuff. Like I remember PSR7 coming along, which was the message, HTTP message, right? And then there were a few other PSRs that were meant to be like how you pass those messages around. But I kind of phased out partway through there. Where are we at with all that stuff?
So admittedly, I have not been following. So PSR 15 is the latest middleware-ish thing, and I have not been following that. I'll be perfectly honest. But it is currently in review, so if you are interested in any of the middleware stuff, now is the time to get your comments in on that.
Okay, I will check it out because HTTP middlewares are fantastic. Been using them at work for a whole bunch of reasons. Been using both server-side middlewares and like client middlewares. So you know you wrap the calls that you're making in middleware before and after, and you wrap the server responses in middlewares, and you can just add cool stuff to that. And some of the client middlewares we've been adding, like sliding a HTTP cache middleware into your requests is amazing. If anyone's ever looked at HTTP caching, it's really complicated to calculate the age of an item. There's like 4 different algorithms you can use, and it's like if you want to work out, so you just call resource A and it will say, you know, you can have this, you can make this thing, you can keep this thing for 10 minutes, but how do you know how long it's already been? So you have to look at the response time, the time the response was made minus the how long it took to make the response plus the current age if the age header is there or some other shit, and you have to go through this totally crazy process to work out how many seconds you theoretically have left and all that sort of thing. And then like if there's an e tag, you should save that and you should put that into Redis along with the response, and then reuse that thing next time. And it's really complicated. But if you just get yourself a for Ruby, there's one called Faraday HTTP cache, and for Guzzle, it's called Guzzle Cache. I can't remember what it's called, but you just slide that middleware onto the stack, and it just does it. So like you try making a request, and then the second time you try making that request, it just doesn't make it. It just grabs it out of Redis or wherever you configured that middleware to store its stuff, and you just made your application be in like multitudes faster. You know, because if that request used to take 200 milliseconds and now it's hitting memcache and taking 3 milliseconds, and everyone's happy and the ice caps don't melt. You know, it's really cool that stuff is possible. But it's going to be more important for the Fig to make it be possible for more people, right? Because if you have to build these middlewares specifically for Guzzle or specifically for whatever other clients there are, there's like 4 of them, then you don't get to share that much code. But if they can all conform to the same thing, then you just like, here's a HTTP PSR 15 middleware thing, and just kind of shove that in there. Then everyone can use it instead of there being 4 different ones or 3 that are a bit shit or whatever it is.
Yeah, it's definitely much better. And I know it was kind of painful. I used to do a whole lot of swim work back in Swim 2. And then we moved a lot of stuff to Laravel, and then moved a lot of stuff to Swim 3. And that whole process of going back and forth is really painful because just a lot of our codes in middleware, because it's just so much better than trying to have like domain logic somewhere and you can just act, on the request and response. But trying to port back and forth to different middleware implementations is just really annoying, right? Like, it's just a middleware. Like you take it and then you do something with it and you return it back. Like that's it. It doesn't need to be complicated. So to have that just standardized is going to be really nice.
Yeah, it's just all about like reducing how much stuff we're doing over and over and over again. Like I said at the start, a lot of the stuff that we put in our apps can be handled by API gateways, and a lot of the stuff that we're doing with interacting with the outside world can be handled with JSON Schema, and then internally a lot of the stuff that we're doing can be handled with middlewares that correspond to standards that already exist. And by the time it comes down to, you know, the gateways and JSON schema and the middlewares that you've slid into place, all you're doing is writing domain logic. You're just writing your business domain logic. You're writing the code that handles the invoice and works out how much tax to add for this specific thing, and doing the stuff that is relevant to your application, and not dicking around with working out the most effective way to make a rate limiter and the best way to pass e-tags around, and whether you should use strong or weak, or what's even the difference. I don't know. So like just don't do all this crap, and let smart people make awesome standards that you can just reference and use tools that implement them for you, so you don't have to learn how everything works just to make an app.
Great.
Yeah. What's going on with conferences?
Yeah, let's do
Going
that.
where? Where are we hanging out? What's going on?
So it's been really quiet on my front for the past couple months. Just this kind of dead season right now. But they're starting back up here in a couple months, right? We got a couple new ones coming to PHP land. Lone Star retired. So there's a new one coming to Marston.
Boo, Daniel.
Yeah, we're all gonna miss that. At least I don't have to see Daniel as much now, though. So that's kind of nice.
That is true. Yeah, it's usually a kind of a dead period around about now, because there's no point in them booking any flights, because nobody from the Northeast will be able to take off because all the airports are grounded. But yeah, usually Sunshine is soon, and we all go flocking to that because it's an excuse to sit in a hot tub in Miami and not be cold. Actually, I'm not going to reference the hot tub because that went poorly the other year.
Yes. So anyway,
it's amazing that you get a bunch of nerds with a bunch of booze in a hot tub and it doesn't go well.
No, we're not accepting that as a scapegoat. Well, they were awkward and they had booze, so they were fucking ridiculous. That's just going to happen, right? No, that's not.
Oh yeah, I'm surprised they was drowned yet. Actually.
Yeah. Wow. One of our friends lost a tooth.
Okay. I'm sure there's a wonderful story there.
Next subject.
Yeah, so we have PHP Benelux, which is coming up at the end of January, at the end of the month. And then we have, I think, Sunshine PHP's next, and that's like the second-ish week in February. And then got, PHP UK after that? And then I have not figured out my schedule beyond that, really. I know there's like Laracon, several Laracons that I will be at, and that's...
How many are there now? It's like 3,
There's
right?
one in London
So
soon.
no, so we have US, EU, we've got the online one, Australia is a new one. Yeah, so that'll be cool. I'm trying to convince my employer, hint, hint, if any of you are listening, to send me to that one. No, I'm not going to get to go because of that.
Boo.
Yeah, so that's coming along. I don't know what people are going to be at this year. I haven't figured my life out, so.
Yeah, it's kind of early. We got a month probably, right?
You say that. So like every year I go through this, I'm going to do less travel. I'm going to do less conferences. And I feel like I'm doing more of them now. But I don't have to speak at all of them, which is nice.
I guess this very bad loop where I'm like, I'm burnt out on travel. I don't want to travel. I'm not going to travel this year. And then like a month in, I'm like,
I'm pissed. I'm like, why am I sitting here?
All my friends are doing all this cool conference shit. Why am I not there?
No, I just get restless. It's not even like when I see people doing stuff, I'm just like, damn it, I don't want to sitting here anymore. I work from home. Struggle's real.
Yeah, the Instagram envy is definitely a thing. I've noticed that it's really easy to accidentally turn it around as well, right? There's been a bunch of times where I'm like, I'm not doing any more conferences, and then I get like, I see 3 kind of pop up that are in interesting places. I'm like, fuck it, I'm gonna apply to these, and I'm sure like one of them will accept me, and then it'll be fine. And then you accidentally get all 3 of them, and you're like, fuck. Now it's back to back. Yeah. So you go from having like 6 months being wide open to like 1 every other month or something, which is a bit much. I've continued to not do conferences this year. I think 2017 I did 1 in Boston and 1 in Columbia, but that was purely because it was my friends for my last company working doing the conference in Columbia, and I wanted the excuse to take my bike down there and ride about. So I only did 2 this year, and that was actually really nice. I was just completely focused on bike racing, and and recovering from crashes and crashing more and racing more and crashing in the races, and it's been a lot of fun. It's nice to take a year off and just focus on something else. But I do miss the travel.
Focus on breaking yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm getting pretty good at you'd want to avoid crashing theoretically, but I'm just getting better at tucking and rolling when I do. So
yeah, that's like that in horseback riding too. Like if you still fall, you just fall smarter. Crash smarter.
Yeah, that happened the other day. I was going down and I just went like on the way to the floor. I was like, oh, for fuck's sake. And I lifted my head up because I didn't have my helmet with me. Lifted my head up so it was nice and out of the way, and then just like let my thigh and my leg take the 3-meter gravel slide. And then some dude came up afterwards and you all right there? I'm like, yeah, totally fine. Carry on, mate. On your way. So yeah, you get used to those things. But I need to start a bike podcast because it's all I ever talk about.
Yeah, please.
I apologize.
You'll have like one viewer.
Yeah, that's fine. I think I have like one viewer on my bike blog. I actually have Filled Up Bike where I write about bike races and shit. And I know that no one reads it. I don't give a fuck. I write it for me. It's basically my live journal. It's my bike-related live journal, and I love it.
Do you have like little things that fly around the screen with like little JavaScript widgets you throw in there?
I have a custom mouse. Yeah, it's actually it's a bike pump.
Trails.
It's a bike pump. Yeah.
Yes. All right. So let's wrap this up. Speaking of conferences, we have a sponsor, Southeast PHP, the Southeast PHP Community Conference, which is a new conference coming to Nashville this year, which I'm pretty excited about. It's going to be really cool to have just a conference in that area, Ethan, because it's starting to feel like a lot of the conferences are like you'll hit 2 or 3 that are in the same general vicinity, right? And it's like, man, I just came to a conference here. So it's always cool to go somewhere new and different.
And Nashville's popping.
Fun. Yeah, I haven't been there in years either, so that'll be cool.
Yeah, oh, it's amazing.
I don't know, it feels like a bit of a humble brag. Like, man, I'm so tired of going to conferences in the same place. Oh. I wish they'd vary.
It's a first world problem.
I wish they'd vary their locations for me.
Why can't they think of me when they do these? Right? All right, so Southeast PHP is going to be August 16th and 17th in downtown Nashville. The call for papers opens February 15th, and they're trying to focus on modern PHP toolbox. This is kind of like the theme of the talks they want. So cool speakers. It's going to be in Nashville, so there's always going to be great music, cool stuff to do. Matt Trask will take you for hot chicken.
I was going to say, you got to have hot chicken.
And so check it out, southeastphp.com. It's southeastphp on Twitter. And if you're interested in sponsoring, hit up organizers at southeastphp.com. And really, thank you guys for sponsoring us. Matt Trask hooked us up with that, and we appreciate it. And we will point as many people as we can to it.
I'm still personally offended you only started getting sponsorship after I left the podcast. I feel like
I wonder why. I wonder why that is.
Must be a coincidence.
Totally.
Well, thank you very much.
Do we have anything else? Do you want to plug your book, Phil? Do you have a link for that?
Oh yeah, probably should. Same website as before, APIsyouwon'thate.com. It's not just the one website for the one book. It's a community. There's a blog. There's a Slack channel. There's loads of shit. APIsyouwon'thate.com for all of your API learning needs. We don't just shit on GraphQL.
The Slack channel, I was a member, and it was actually more boring than this podcast has been somehow.
It depends. We've got a few interesting people recently. There's 2,000 folks on there now. So anything you need an answer to, you will get an answer to. But yeah, there's not exactly many car chases or explosions. It's a fucking Slack channel about APIs. What are you expecting?
Amanda, do you have anything else?
I don't. I think.
All right, cool. All right. Thanks everyone for listening. We'll catch y'all in a couple of weeks or a couple of months, depending on how lazy we are. So, later.
See ya.